Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Hardware Diversity Discussion in 2018. This is episode 3 for this year, and today we have a very, very special guest on board, Chris from The Good Old Gamer. I've been talking about it for the last few weeks on Twitter, and here he goes. So, how have you been?
I'm doing well. Like I was telling you a little bit earlier, enjoying my Sunday. Really trying to get this video up, but I'm like, I think I'm just going to relax. So, sometimes you just got to take a break. I put up a lot of videos this week, so it's like, let's take 5.
Take 5, exactly right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess the first part of our conversation is sort of some introductions out of the way. So, who you are, a bit about your career and hobbies, and sort of even, why you chose YouTube as one of your outlets, I guess. So, yeah, take it away.
Okay, so hobby is obviously gaming, and tech have always been my big hobby, and that kind of led into YouTube. Actually, my friend Joe and I started the channel originally, and it's mostly because he and I would have these conversations about games or whatever, just anything that's coming out. And we would always come up with these really interesting scenarios, and we would just dive too deep into things. And I always thought it'd be fun for other people to join into that conversation. And that's how the channel was originally intended to go. But the way that it ended up happening is we had an introduction video like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Nobody watched it. Then we started talking about Overwatch. Nobody watched it. And then we talked about the GTX 1080 and 1070, and we hit, I think it's over 100,000 views at this point, but it hit 50 or 60. So it's like going from absolutely nowhere into 1,000 subs overnight. So that was, so we kind of figured out real quick. It's like, well, this is what people want to talk about. So that was the reason why we went that direction. And pretty much been just kind of sticking with that ever since. I've been trying to do other things with the channel, but obviously the tech stuff, that's what people come for. That's what they want to hear about. So we tend to stick within that niche. Joe went on, he wanted to get more into games. He wanted to do live streaming. So he now runs the Varangian, and he does that. So he's having fun with that. Every once in a while, I'm like, hey, you want to come back? And he's like, no, I'm good. He's happy doing what he's doing. So but yeah, so that's basically how the channel got started. And like I said, me personally, it's just kind of a hobby. Realistically, I was like, well, if we can either get some free swag or, maybe a couple extra bucks a month, why not? That's how it kind of started off. And still, it's just a part-time thing for me. I still work full-time, and I just try to get out as many quality videos as I can, and, just trying to build the business. And once I can get to that point, I would like to do it full-time, or at least have that be my primary, and then have something else as a secondary. That would be pretty nice. So, it's just one day at a time, and that's what I'm working towards.
Very, very cool. Yeah, no, I think it was probably around the time you started doing your GPC videos that I started watching the channel, and it certainly progressed a heck of a lot since then. And I like how, in some of your videos you talked about, keeping away from a lot of the rumours, talking about the facts, and just displaying, well, this is what I think, and, this is my interpretation of what's going on, and I definitely give you full praise for that, definitely. Also, you've started the Millennial Trap channel. That's a new project of yours? So just a little bit about, that is, in a sense, what's that about, and the history behind
why
that.
Make another channel type question? Well, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking there's a lot of other things that I want to talk about other than tech and games, and have a more serious, more realistic conversation with the YouTube community. And the Millennial Trap is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I'm honestly thinking about writing a book about it. I'm not a very good writer, so that's precluding me from doing that at the moment. But it's the trap that my entire generation was fed, and kids are still being fed this nonsense today. Just the way that the world actually works, people aren't really taught how things go, and then they get upset and throw riots, and you see all these things going on campuses around the country. It's because people are underlying tone of it is people are upset that they've been lied to their whole life. If people were told the truth from when they were kids, I honestly don't believe all these things would be happening. So trying to help people figure things out and show them a better direction, or the direction that they should be going. That's kind of the point of that channel. part of me, and actually it was a commenter on one of my videos, suggested that I separate it, keep it on the Good Old Gamer, but separate it into a different playlist.
Yep.
And I'm thinking that might be the better way to go, as it would allow me to generate more content for the Good Old Gamer instead of splitting my attention.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that may be the way that I go. I still have to think about it. But like I said, this week's been so busy with tech stuff that just had to do it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, definitely, because you see a lot of like people who are, on YouTube have claimed to have made millions of dollars and all that kind of thing, and it's just like, no, I made the joke about getting Ty Lopez on the channel. I don't know if you've seen who he is now, but
didn't check him out yet. No, I saw the comment and I'm like, I have to check this out, but I just haven't gotten around to it.
Well, he's famous for saying, "Oh, I'm in my garage with a Lamborghini." I don't know, but anyway, and I just
right. It's kind of like Alex Becker with his Ferrari there. I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just thought, well, what it would be coming from a person who's actually seems quite well versed and not just into the marketing and not into just pay for my course sort of bizzo. It would, I think, it would be quite interesting to see what you have to say about that. But more on that sort of possibly towards the end or later on. But anyway, so shall we, before we get started, I would like to put some advertising out, and you can put some advertising out as well. But I've got a Facebook group called Hardware Talk New Zealand, where you can come and talk about a lot of new things and tech and all that kind of stuff. So please feel free to join, and I'll put links to description in in there as well. But do you have anything you want to share before we get started in terms of where we can find you?
Well, I'm assuming you're going to put a link in the description.
Oh, of course, yes, definitely, yeah.
Alrighty, guys. So if you like what you're seeing here, go ahead and subscribe. Brett's a pretty cool dude. He's been bugging me forever for this. He's very persistent. He gets his way. So that's what you should expect in somebody who's going to be bringing you quality content. He's tenacious. But if you want to go ahead and hear more of what I have to say, click the link in the description below. You can go ahead and check out the Good Old Gamer. And I was going to say, we might put the Millennial Trap in there, but I think I'm going to just condense it down. So just go ahead and check that out. And if you like what I have to say, subscribe to me too. That really helps me out.
Yeah, definitely. And I was trying to find you on Twitter and on Facebook, but I couldn't see you anywhere there as well.
Nope, I hate social media. I'm going to be very honest with everybody out there. I absolutely hate social media. I have a Discord server, which if you want to put a link for that, I'll get you a link. You can put that in the description as well. If you really want to get in touch with me, that's where you're going to do it. Pretty much other than that, I don't feel like dealing with like 15 accounts all over the place. Fair
enough, yeah. No, I just certainly like in my part of the world, it's crazy that we're about 12 hours apart here. Not much of an outlet for tech, so I thought, well, this is certainly would be a place to go. But anyway, we will move on to sort of part one, which is we called it the rumor mill, and this is what you'd like to avoid on your channel. But I suppose there's been a lot of it lately, and we thought we'd do a quick roundup of that, as I have sort of covered that in previous episodes. But we thought we'll go a heck of a lot more in depth with what's out there at the moment. So
Sure.
So we'll start off with Nvidia. This is a huge leak this week from an inside source that Jim from Adored TV has got himself a hold of. And it's saying that, well, we're not going to just have the GTX line anymore in terms of in terms of the mainstream hardware, alongside the Titans and all that kind of thing. So what's your thoughts? Because I know you did a video on this as well, and it's crazy. It's just crazy.
It really is. I've done a lot of speculation videos on the GTX 1180. I'm going to be very honest with you guys out there. It's mostly because that's what the community wants. There's only so long, people come to your shop. It's like, hey, I want a ham sandwich. Well, we don't sell ham. I got turkey. You got to give them what they want sometimes. But I absolutely 100% did not see this coming up. No. Ironically enough, I had a thumbnail when RTX was announced, and I crossed out the GTX and I wrote RTX next to it. Yeah. Apparently, I knew subconsciously at that point. I was going to use that thumbnail again and just be like, hey, look, I knew back then.
Yeah.
But, this still isn't confirmed, so we're not 100% sure. Realistically, when it comes to the NVIDIA stuff, they're going to announce on the 20th. SIGGRAPH is in a couple of days. They'll probably talk about ray tracing and the technology. That's something we'll touch on here in a little bit. But that's what they'll do there. They're not going to talk about product. They'll wait until they have their gaming event, and that's when it'll come up. So we're not too far away. I'm kind of at the point, like, I didn't want to do any more speculating because it was so close. It's like, might as well just wait and see. But with Jim's bombshell, it actually lined up it solved some, or answered some questions that I had and my source had. My source kept telling me, he's like, well, they're testing a Pascal card. Now they're testing a Volta card. And they were very similar in spec. And I'm like, I don't know why they would do that. So at first we're like, maybe one's a mining card, maybe one's a gaming card. Yeah. And we couldn't really figure out what the heck Nvidia was doing. And then Jim dropped the bomb that they're going to come out with another lineup. And then that's when it clicked in my head. Perhaps they're going to segment the market again. Yeah. And that's basically what I mentioned in my video.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose going over what the differences are is talking about this hardware accelerated ray tracing technology, and saying, well, these supposed, in Jim's video particularly, he talked about the having the GTX 2060 and 2050 not having that available, but you're going even further with your source and saying, well, actually, even at the high end, they're still going to have the GTX, but it's possibly going to be Pascal based, or possibly remove the hardware ray tracing acceleration for people who don't need it. But he said in his video, you're going to want it. He's going to, obviously Nvidia's marketing is, pretty incredible, and they can make sure that, if this is the latest, if this is the new architecture, you're going to, all the other cards previous are going to be, pushed aside completely.
They're going to be out of date, but they'll still sell them to you.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and that's what I think is going to happen. They'll come out with this new fancier lineup. And in my video, I said maybe like if they have an 1180 RTX and 1180 GTX, maybe they'll charge $300 more. It could be anything. If they want an extra $100, but it performs the same, but it's newer technology, they can command a premium for that product.
Yeah.
So it's really smart marketing when you really think about it, because it's an extra way to get more money out of your pocket. Plus, they can harvest old Pascal cards that were returned and do a bunch of things like that. So for them, it's just win-win, and this is all due to the fact that there's no competition.
Well, wasn't there a big thing like a couple of months ago that they've got like millions in stock just sitting there because of the over-ordering that people were doing or something?
That wasn't mine. There was that article that came out where they had a $300,000 return on some Pascal cards. But realistically, Nvidia made so much money off Pascal, they could just throw 300,000 chips in the trash and be way ahead. I mean, for them, it absolutely does not matter. It's an insignificant amount of money. For the most part, from what I heard, they were just going to shrink them down and sell them to OEMs as some cheap knockoff or something. Cut them down like the the new 1050 3 gig, or the new 1050 3 gig, or something like the 1030 DDR4. Just make something cheap out of them. Just sell them. Just make some of their money back. I don't think they really care about them, but like I said, it looks like they're still making Pascal chips, and it's kind of strange.
It is kind of odd. I mean, we haven't seen this sort of segmentation since, as Jim talked about, the MX series of GPUs all the way back, over a decade ago, where the new technology is at the high end, and people, the mid-range, people will be unaware of this, and it's like,
well, I would actually argue, I mean, it happened more recently than that. The GTX 200 series, you had the 80 and the 60 were the new chips, and then the 50 was just an old GTX, or 9800 GTX. It was just it was just a rebrand. So. And everything below that was a rebrand. So I mean, this has happened more recently as well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and it's just crazy that like they would still, make a whole new lineup, and have no difference. I suppose money making is definitely a factor in that, but like it just seems really odd that you would you'd fool people almost, like that's what it comes down to. It's actually deceiving the market, and it's like do you actually do you get let away with that? I just don't know.
Well, I mean, the market's chosen that. I mean, a lot of my viewers, they put their 2 cents out there, and I mean, nobody's really happy about this except for the extreme Nvidia diehards who will just buy Nvidia no matter what. Every sane person wants competition. They want better prices. They want better products. It's only the crazy fanboys out there, and I just ignore these people, that they don't want competition. They want their team to win no matter what. And unfortunately, the majority of the market has chosen. Realistically speaking, I make more money as a YouTuber when I cover Nvidia products. Plain and simple, I make more money, which means other YouTubers make more money because more people want to see that. So plain and simple, Nvidia not only makes them more money, it makes everybody else more money. And when you're in that type of situation, it's just like Fortnite. Fortnite makes more money than, you know, Rainbow Six or, you know, other esports games. So more people are going to go ahead and cover it. So the market is chosen, and honestly, now it's just time for Nvidia to reap the rewards of basically taking over the entire mind share of the whole market. Only true enthusiasts understand what's the better product at better price points.
Exactly right. Yeah. No, and I'm glad that there's people out here who are actually objective with that, and certainly I've encountered that on your channel, and it's been great to see, well, what's actually out there and what can we do about it, creating more competition and supporting, you know, the underdog, definitely.
Right.
So shall we?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I was just going to chime in. Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of videos. When AMD is competitive at a certain price point, I will never recommend an Nvidia product. Like the RX 480 and 580 were great for the money, so I always recommended those over the 1060s, just because it was the, you know, relatively equivalent product, a little bit cheaper on price. The 1060 at the time was a little bit faster. I'm like, it balances out. You got to support the competition when it's there. Otherwise, you won't have the competition.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I suppose moving on to that, we shall talk about AMD. I suppose this is part 2 of our rumor mill, and sort of there's a lot, you know, lot to cover there as well. So I guess the big news was that came out at. Was it at oh man, I can't think now where they released it, but
Computex, right?
Yeah, the Vega 20, yeah. So
yeah,
that was a huge bombshell too. Like, and it's not, you know, that it's not going to be coming to, you know, you and I, you know, in any reasonable form of money. And
yeah, I don't believe that, but that's just me. We'll talk about that in a sec.
Yeah. And you know, 400 watts of power, basically a Vega 10 shrunk, you know, by 50%, and probably about a 15 to 20% more IPC gain than what's out there at the moment. But yeah, so you dispel the rumor and say that yes, we'll get Vega 20 as a sort of a mid-high end GPU.
Ultimately, it comes down to where Navi is. If they can get Navi out to compete, they'll probably just do that. But if Navi is still towards the end of 2019, I could see them throwing out 1 or 2 SKUs to go ahead and curb Nvidia's massive growth that they're going to have in an unchallenged market. Especially if Nvidia does do the GTX and RTX and tries to segment the market again. That's when competition's at its best or most opportune, because the market's not going to like that. No. So if you come out with something, and realistically, and I've been saying this in the past few videos, and I'm going to start doing a whole series on this. As long as you can compete at the $199 and $399 price points, the rest don't matter. The rest are irrelevant. You can keep enough market share with just those 2 price points. And with the Vega 7, I said a long time ago, I actually did a video on that. If they bring it out, and it should be able to compete with whatever the GTX, or I guess RTX 2070 or 1170 or whatever it happens to be, which will be around that 400. Well, it'll probably be around the $500 or $600 price point. Yeah. But if they can sell something for $400 to $500, it can be very competitive. Now, what I found really funny was, I don't know if you saw the video that I did about the new Chinese SoC console.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So right in there, it proves that Vega can use GDDR5. Boom. Yep. That whole it has to use HBM thing is horseshit. Yeah. So they absolutely could use GDDR6 if they wanted to with the Vega 7 nanometers. So there's really nothing stopping them except for cost. And I know the HBM is one of the huge cost factors, but you eliminate HBM, you're talking about a 350, maybe 400 millimeter squared GPU. Well, actually, it wouldn't be that big. I think they measured it out at about 300 millimeters squared, which isn't that expensive to produce.
No.
And then you have GDDR6, which Gamers Nexus did a video on. That's not very expensive. So they absolutely could do it if they wanted to.
Yeah, and I still I was blown away by that console as well. I mean, I sort of talked, hyped it up and said, this is something I'm going to talk about today, and it's certainly something that is, really interesting. That not only have AMD reaped, Vega Mobile in the wild first, but actually, GDR5, I suppose, and it also being on one die as well. It's not it's not separate like they are with the Hades Canyon, sort of situation. So that's really cool, and hopefully, maybe in a couple of years' time we'll actually see that on a socket as well. That'd be really, really cool. But Vega 20, it's gonna compete, and I suppose, breaking on from that, I just wanted to talk about AMD as a whole and Nvidia as a whole, I guess, and it's saying that I kind of, I came up with an analogy the other day talking about AMD feels to me like a muscle car. They're really fast, they've got a lot of compute power, and they go in a straight line really well. Nvidia kind of reminds me of a supercar. I have a lot more versatile, they've got the support to go around a corner properly and do all that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, well, there's only so far compute can push you. If you don't have the optimization for that, if you don't put traction control on your car, if you don't have ABS braking and all that kind of thing, then you can't go around a corner properly. So I don't know. Is that something you think in terms of how the marketplace is at the moment, where you'd compare those two companies out?
I mean, it certainly seems that way. I would say it's a fair analogy with the way things have been done, the way that it kind of works out. Honestly, it ultimately comes down to the game developers and the game engines. For example, Unreal Engine 4 is an absolute piece of crap, and it runs horribly. It's just not optimized for AMD hardware at all, not even in the slightest. This is why PUBG on Xbox runs like a complete turd. It's because it's just not designed to run on that hardware. And it ultimately just comes down to the game engines. Most game developers, especially smaller ones, are not skilled enough to tweak the engine enough to make it work on separate hardware.
Yep.
So realistically, I think AMD is going to be kind of stuck. They've stuck around with GCN for a while now. That's kind of on them. They should have tried to at least update it. I mean, they have updated it, but it's kind of the catch-22. You have the consoles over here, which is your biggest GPU supply. Yep. That's where you're selling most of your GPUs. And they obviously knew that they were going to do the refresh. So keeping the architecture the same made that real easy. And if they keep it again, which we all are pretty sure Navi's still going to be some sort of GCN or NCU, which is still just GCN, then once again, you have complete backwards compatibility with the current consoles. So that might be the reason why they said, well, screw it. These are the people buying our GPUs. The rest of the market just deal with it. But once the game engines become more optimized for that, realistically, games, for the most part, will run better on AMD hardware. And you do see that on decent ports from console to PC. Most games will actually run better on AMD hardware. The only games that don't are either on game engines that just don't run well on AMD hardware, like Unreal Engine 4. There's a couple other ones. And then, where was I going with that? So sometimes you lose your train of thought. Yeah. My brain went on to the next subject there for a second.
Yeah. Well, supposed to be. I'll talk about the PS5 soon anyway. But carry on.
Yeah, I was going to say, so unless you have bad, poorly optimized game engines or GameWorks, that was the next thing. GameWorks, So if it's a GameWorks game, it's going to run worse on AMD hardware. And that just makes sense. Nvidia is now paying you to make their game run better on their hardware than the competition. So they're getting what they paid for. And then, like I said, there's just some poorly optimized game engines. But for the majority of them, like the Battlefield games, the Frostbite engine typically just runs better across the board.
Until now, of course. But yeah.
Well, I don't know. The last time I saw, the RX 580 was destroying the GTX 1060 and Battlefield 5. So, and that's because AMD worked with them early on with Battlefield 4 and Mantle and all that. So the engine itself, the base foundation, is built better for their technology. And there are a few other game engines that do technically run better. Now, Far Cry 5 was interesting because the Duina engine typically ran better on Nvidia hardware, but this time around it now runs better on AMD. But once again, AMD paid.
Exactly.
They paid for that optimization. So that's just the world that we live in now. It just whoever's going to bribe who the most is going to win.
And I don't think AMD's R&D team and marketing team is nearly as big as others. That's for sure.
Yeah, they don't make as much money yet, but I mean their CPU department's going to be picking up, so you never know.
I suppose we'll move on to the PS5 as the next topic, and saying that it was obviously Navi was constructed for it. That's been out in the open for a while now, and they're talking about saying that Navi is not going to be their multi-chip module that once again Adore TV was talking about. I had a thought in my head about that the other day too, and saying, well, actually, what if we'll go to the Ryzen and Ryzen sort of how that's constructed with the two separate CCX modules, 4 CCX modules, I guess you want to call it, and what if the PS5 had like one module of Navi architecture, and you wanted to scale up to say, you wanted like a GTX 1070 or 1080 level performance GPU. You just add on these extra chips that would be one particular core count size. They used Infinity Fabric and like the memory controller for like GDR6 or HBM to communicate with those other GPUs. Is that, do you think that's a possibility as well, or is Navi just going to be a big monolithic die like they have been in the past?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, that's what I thought that they'd be able to do. I mean, it simply makes sense. If you can make it work on a CPU, you can give me whatever line of BS out there. If you can make it work on a CPU, you can make it work on a GPU.
Yeah.
There's really, the limitations and challenges should be relatively similar. I mean, latency might be a bit of an issue, and maybe that's where they're running into a problem because of how interconnected everything would need to be. That's really the only realistic issue that I could understand. But considering AMD themselves, I forgot the gentleman's name. He just took over the RTG over there. He flat out said that it's not going to be MCM. And like I said, they must have just hit a roadblock, because it does make more sense to make a 100 millimeter square GPU that you could link 4, 6, or 8 of them together, because it would cost almost nothing to make. And it would scale linearly as far as cost goes. So this way they could always be ahead of Nvidia no matter what, and scale it as high as they really wanted to, or as high as thermals would really allow. So that'd be nice. But I think it's just going to be a monolithic piece of technology at this point, unless they're lying and want to come out swinging. And that's another thing. I think AMD learned with Vega that coming out with too much too early really, really hurt them. And they set expectations too high, and I got burned on it, because I was like, okay, they did good with Ryzen. They hit their targets. They did good with the RX 480. They hit the targets that they'd set with that. And then, they come out, every slide's like 2 times. So I was expecting a new architecture that was basically twice the IPC. And that's kind of where I was going with it, because everything that they're showing is it's twice as fast. It's obviously not twice as fast. In fact, when the Frontier Edition first came out, it was actually slower than the old Fury architecture. So I was like, I was like, okay, well, my bad, guys. I'm sorry. I was going off of what they said. They had a good track record, and that really burned me. And I still have people out there talking about that. It's like, oh, he was wrong here. And it's like, well, I went off the information that I had, so shame on me.
And especially they came out at, I don't know what their big conference was that they released. They had the demo playing Doom.
I think that was CES the year before, or like, 2017.
And it's like the performance didn't actually increase between that and the release, and it's like
8 months later, no performance increase.
What do you do? That's that was quite a shame, and I hope that, and but then again, going back to some interviews that they've had recently, it was made for Apple. It was a compute workstation card, and I suppose I don't know. Does
that real good?
It does. One of the best out there.
Right.
But having that in terms of competing in a gaming space, it's like blurring the lines there is quite a dangerous thing to do. And I suppose not allowing that to be actually, said in the first place, saying, well, this is actually a workstation card, not actually a gaming GPU, could have helped sales potentially.
Well, the worst thing that they ever did was release it for gaming. They could have come out with the Frontier Edition as a semi workstation and never released RX Vega. People would be pissed because then there would be no GPUs to buy. But at the same time, the market would understand that the card is not a gaming card. You can use it for gaming, but it's not really a gaming card. And realistically, it's not a gaming card. Polaris is gaming. Vega was not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I saw a review recently of like one of their new WX series GPUs, the workstation ones, and supposedly they actually game better on the workstation drivers than they do the gaming drivers, which seems really odd as well. It's like
yeah. I mean, it tells you where AMD's focusing their money, and hey, I mean, those people pay $2,000-$3,000 for a video card. You can't really complain if you're taking a back seat to that.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and I just hope that in the future, if this is, Vega obviously it still hasn't been optimized with all its features that it was quote unquote going to have since day one, and we noticed that even with the Hades Canyon that it was actually still pretty much IPC on par with Polaris. It was just crazy to see that, still, over a year later, it's still not even close to where it could have been.
No, I think actually Jim, when he did his Vega review over there at Adore TV, he said it's not going to be a year. It's going to be like 3 or 4 years before Vega maxes out. But by then, obviously, you'll be able to buy something far more powerful. So it was just, there's too much technology in that architecture and in those, in those GPUs for the gaming industry. Like it's not designed for that. So they have to program. Basically, the drivers need to take over and go, okay, you do this, you do this. You need more traffic cops, I guess is the best way to put that. And obviously that has its own drawbacks. And if you put somebody in the wrong spot, it throws everything off and then you get slowdown. So that's kind of how it works. It's just not really a gaming device, really.
Yeah. I suppose we'll move on to the CPU side now. And this is something a heck of a lot more exciting for sure. And that is... Zen 2, a lot of leaks about increased core counts and higher IPC, or where they're going to go with 7 nanometers in general. So yeah, I mean, I suppose I did cover this a little bit, but I suppose in a less technical sense than today. So yeah, what are your thoughts with that?
Well, Zen 2 is going to shake up everything. I did a video. Intel is basically in the worst position they've been in forever. I mean, they're using the same architecture from back in 2011. They don't have anything on the back burner, which was hilarious because that's what everybody said. All the Intel guys out there were like, "Oh, Intel's got something in the back.
Yeah, they're going to drop it.
They're going to drop. They don't have anything. No. They have nothing at all." And they were caught with their pants down. And you add that on top of the fact that their manufacturing is not where it needs to be right now, and they're going to be in some serious trouble. Now, as far as Zen 2, they're not going to have competition because it's Intel's fault. Now, them competing with themselves, we're probably going to see somewhere around 5 to 10% in IPC. I wouldn't expect anything super crazy there.
Yep.
But the process change will allow for a lot of things. The CCX, you have double the die space. So doubling your core count just simply makes sense. You can use the exact same. It'll be a little bit bigger, but essentially the same die size, and deliver double the core count, which will allow you to have 16 core, 32 thread CPUs on mainstream platforms, which means that would be competing against the i9 9900K, which it will not be able to compete. The 9900K, even at 5 gigahertz, can't touch a 4 gigahertz 16 core.
No.
But now, on top of that, you do get all of the speed increases with 7 nanometer with a full node change. We're already at like 4.3. The new Threadrippers are 4.5 gigahertz.
Yep.
So we know the best of the best can get up to 4.5. You throw on that process change, 5 gigahertz is probably going to happen. So if you get that IPC increase, 5 to 6%, they still may be a little bit behind Intel, but we're talking about maybe 1 or 2%. Then you have clock parity, and then you can also double up the cores. I mean, there's simply nothing Intel can do against that because it's essentially the exact same performance but more cores, and then it just all comes down to price at that point.
Yeah, and obviously, with talking about not having anything else on tap, their 28 core is, that was it's going to be nowhere to be seen, and that was chilled with a 1.7 kilowatt fish tank cooler to get it to 5 gigahertz. It was just like, if they had anything else on tap, you'd think that would be where they would do it. But it seems not.
They're going to sell their $10,000 processor for, I mean, even if they're selling them for $3,000, they're losing so much money off of that just because of Threadripper 2. If you think about that, that's at the minimum, they're going to be losing $7,000 per chip just because of Threadripper 2. So that is how big of an impact AMD is really having. So their margins are just going to drop. And then next year, they'll probably stick with the 32. I'm thinking you'll have 16, 32, and 64 from Ryzen, Threadripper, and Epic. And I mean, that just makes sense. There's just really not a whole lot Intel can do till they get up to speed. But yeah, the whole 5 gigahertz 28 core thing, the fact that anybody believed that is beyond me. I'm like, come on, people. You have to delid a 6-core CPU to get it to 5 gigahertz.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah. And I think those Xeons will be soldered?
I think they probably will be. I mean, to keep thermals in check, they're going to have to be soldered. There's no way that those things aren't.
Yeah. And they finally got around to soldering their i9s as well. Their their mainstream i9s, which is just we're waiting for that for how long?
Yeah. Well, it's the same reason. It's just to keep it cool. There's no way that they'd be able to bring those out with the toothpaste and expect normal coolers to handle that. It wouldn't work. So they have to solder them, and they'll probably do the same with the 9700K as well, just to say that they're listening to us and they really care. Yeah, I suppose I didn't actually bring Threadripper up in the document, but that was a huge announcement that it's here, it's out, and you can buy it today. I think it's just 32 cores. Yeah.
For what was it, $18.99 US?
Yes, it was under 2,000.
Yeah, which is just.
I just know it's undercutting Intel's. What was it? Their 18 core.
Yeah.
They undercut their 18 core by like $200 or something, and now you get 32 cores.
Oh dear, and I hope that they're obviously I think Lisa for a while picked up their GPU division, AMD's GPU division, and I think maybe they'd get that into check, relatively quickly, but. Have they given up? I think was it you or was it Jim that was saying, is gaming graphics dead for AMD or?
I did a video on that, and Jim's really taken that to heart. He's really not happy with AMD on graphics right now, which I mean he has every right to be. I mean, the market relied on AMD to keep Nvidia in check. Unfortunately, the market did not support AMD enough to keep Nvidia in check. So it's kind of it's just a circle of crap. And I think Jim's just burnt out because he's tired of NVIDIA running the show. But realistically, the only GPU segment that really makes sense for AMD are consoles and mobile. And you can just cut down the console chips for mobile because that's where the majority of their graphics are going anyway. But like I said, that's why if they focus on just the $199 and $399 price points, they can have it all. They don't have to compete with the $1,000 GPs. They don't need to. Now they may need to in the deep learning market. They might need something extra for that, but realistically, I think that they need to just focus on gaming with gaming and have a completely separate lineup for the deep learning, which is kind of what NVIDIA's somewhat doing. Because I don't know if we're going to get straight Volta or if it's going to be changed and altered for gaming. We don't know yet. So, but at least right now, it looks like they have separate things for their deep learning divisions. So I think it'd be smart for AMD to do the same thing. And anything faster than, like I said, the $400 price point, I don't think that they really need to go for it. So
we'll just have to, certainly like Navi, we'll have to wait and see certainly like how scalable, it was meant to be, but it is actually in the real world. Yeah. So we talked a bit about Intel already, but I suppose we'll talk about the new segment that they're going to be up to very soon, and that is actually a graphics card.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard you talk much about this, so
There's not much to really talk about other than the fact that they're interested in getting into the graphics market and they stole Raja Kaduri. I mean, other than that, we don't really know anything. But realistically, it makes sense because they're losing a lot of server market share to Nvidia because of it. So obviously they want to stem that tide as much as possible. Plus, PC gaming is very lucrative. You know, I might be talking about like you don't need to put out $1,000 GPUs because you don't. You know, they can cut them down pretty far into that 100 or 199, 399 price point. If they have a competitive product, they'll make a crap ton of money off of it. So, I mean, it makes sense for them to go ahead and get in there just because they want to keep that server market dominance, and they're really going to be taking it on the chin from AMD on the CPU side, and Nvidia is kicking their butts because they have no GPU competitor. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me, and all indications point that it's going to happen. What it's going to look like, when it's going to happen, it's all up in the air. There's nothing concrete enough to really talk.
Is it going to be, you know, a scaled up version of the integrated graphics, perhaps? Cause,
I doubt it.
Yeah,
it's not strong enough in compute to really matter against an Nvidia chip. They need something else. Kind of like I don't know if you saw Linus got his hand on one of the old Larrabee. Yeah, and that was a completely different way of doing things. If Intel goes that route, I think that they'd be successful. But if they just try to copy and paste the way that either AMD or an Nvidia is doing stuff and just tweak it a little bit, I don't think they'll be as successful because they're not in that market. People aren't going to trust their drivers. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be for a gaming application. It's going to be quite interesting to see. Obviously, you know, Raja's there. He's obviously wanted, he obviously wanted to take RTG back to the ATI days of creating his own company, I guess. So he's very persistent with, the gaming, graphics and obviously that sort of thing. But do you think he's going to be able to lead Intel enough into that market where it's possible, or is it just going to be for workstation and server applications?
Well, like I said, I mean, Intel owns their own fab, so it's real cheap for them to just go ahead and produce different size chips based off of the same technology. So as long as they can scale it down efficiently enough, they absolutely will, because there's money to be made there. It's, Nvidia's making over $1 billion a quarter. I mean, to Intel, that's nothing. If they lost $1 billion a quarter, they wouldn't even notice. They'd be like, did we lose something? I don't know. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. But, it's still $1 billion. So if they could get, half of that or a third of that or whatever, yeah, why not? You already have the technology, just shrink it down, make it cheaper and sell it to consumers. Or maybe it'll just be like partially defective server grade stuff. Whatever makes sense for them. So yeah, there's really no reason for them not to scale it down. I could see them maybe not wanting it in like the professional market, maybe skipping like that Quadro lineup, because drivers are super, super critical in that market. Drivers don't really matter as much for gaming, and they don't really matter as much in that the server market, because the software takes over at that point. Gaming, it kind of matters, but not near as much as it does in that professional market. I completely agree. And it'd be interesting to see, where next year. I think 2019 is definitely going to be a big year for tech. They were saying that 2017 was, and this year's sort of on a bit of a hiatus at the moment, and next year will definitely be very exciting again. I suppose we talked about, Intel's fabs and stuff like that, and I said there's no specific article for this, so I guess talking about whether Intel's going to sell off that side of their company. Are they going to be able to maintain their production, I guess? I mean, it really depends. I mean, if somebody wants to come in with enough money and buy it out from them, I bet you they'll sell it. If somebody's like, we'll give you $50 billion, because it'll be $50 or $100 billion to buy that business. But yeah, I think if somebody had that kind of money and wanted to do it, I think that they would sell it. At this point, technologically they are losing ground to the other fabs out there. everybody wants to say, well, Intel's 10 nanometer would be better, but it's not. It's not better. And the only day that matters is today. Nobody cares about tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't matter, because especially in the fab business, if you screw up a node, you may not see tomorrow because of all the billions of dollars you will lose in between now and then. Intel's lucky that their 14 nanometer plus is actually so good, or their plus, whatever it is now. It's actually really, really good and better than any of the other fabs at 14 nanometers or 12 nanometers. So, you know, they have that going for them, but it's not going to be enough to keep up with the next 7 nanometer chips there. So I don't think that they'll sell, just because it would take somebody with an extreme amount of money to be able to afford that. Next off, they would probably want them to go ahead and give them some sort of deal, like some sort of price cuts if they wanted to produce anything there. And I just don't think anybody would want to deal with that right now. Now, next year, if AMD takes over 30% of the server market, they'll probably end up selling because they need to get in there real quick. The second you see them producing a chip at TSMC, that's the moment you know that they're probably going to sell. So,
yeah, I mean, obviously, like, you know, at the moment, I think they're still only yielding dual-core atoms in the 10 nanometer node. Is that right?
I think it's a Pentium.
It's a Pentium. Oh, okay, yeah. And I think some of it even has the graphics fused off.
yeah. It can't run at the same clock speeds as 14 nanometer plus, and they can't get the graphics working.
It's just
right now it's worthless. Might as well not even exist realistically, unless they can get that up and running very fast. I would say skip it. If I was Intel, I'd just write it off as a loss. Go to the next node and beat everybody else to the market to it, and that would probably help them out. And like I said, we don't know anything about that, and that might be the case. Maybe that's the way that they're shifting it. I do have a source that telling me that Intel basically ignores the fact that 10 nanometer even exists. They don't talk about it. Wow. They're not planning on it. It's pretty much as dead to them as it is to the rest of us. So I'm not really sure what that means or if the source is accurate, but they don't seem confident in it. So I think that they're going to try and skip it.
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying about the current node being as good as, better than current nodes out there, excluding what their Radeon's workstation stuff, the 7 nanometers, but it's it'd be interesting if they kept that, but I suppose you probably can't push it anymore. That's as far as you can go, and
right.
Would that be, how much in the further will that still be viable? But it seems possibly would not, and I guess that's going on to part 3 of our discussion, with Intel, and that's obviously the i9s and the i7s with the 8 cores and the and stuff like that on the mainstream. So I guess as I said, that's going to be obviously Eminem and 8 Mile and their last shot. So I mean,
pretty much.
Yeah, it's just we're not going to see anything for them until obviously their new node, and it's going to be a bit of a shame, I guess, because we're at the point where Intel's no longer the go-to for that stuff. Yeah,
unfortunately, they're not the leader. They're not leading in innovation. They're not. I mean, they technically do have the technology lead right now. I mean, the i9-9900K is going to be the fastest consumer-grade CPU ever.
Yeah.
I mean, hands down, it's just going to be. It's going to absolutely destroy the 2700X, probably by 30, maybe 35%.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's pretty solid. It just comes down to price point and things like that. But like I said, AMD next year with Zen 2, they catch up on IPC, they catch up on clock speeds, and they can literally double the core count, and they can sell them at the same prices as current Ryzen CPUs if they wanted to, because the die is not going to be any bigger.
No.
So Intel can't do squat about that. So they're pulling out all the stops right now. They want to get as many people as they can to buy these things this holiday season. And nobody's going to need to upgrade from an i9-9900K for probably 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So once you get one of these into somebody's home, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's really smart for Intel to say, screw it, let's just swing for the fences and let it be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still, because like one of my upcoming videos is talking about like the Intel mobile CPUs, talk about, that as a whole sort of thing. And their naming scheme for their CPUs is horrid. And I think it's just going to be even more, complicated with, the i9s coming to mainstream. That was going to be the high-end CPUs and stuff like that. It's just like, do you think that's going to be completely reshuffled, from now on, I guess you're going to say?
Well, I think just Intel, they didn't want to do this. They were really hoping that the 8700K would hold them over until their woes with manufacturing got fixed. But, the 2700X showed that the 8700K is not going to be able to hold, especially not against the 7-nanometer chip. It's just 6 cores and 12 threads is not going to hold over the mainstream market. Mainstream market's going to need that 8-core. So this is kind of Intel saying, all right, we'll do this, but we need to add another segment. So it's just segmenting the market. It's more confusing, which is annoying, but to them, they don't care. They just want to make sure that they can sell this thing for $500 when it launches. It's really what it comes down to. Now, in the mobile market, things don't make any sense because it can be an i7 that's 2 cores and 4 threads.
Yeah.
And it's like, when did that ever make sense?
Yeah.
So, whenever I'm looking at a laptop, I copy and paste the CPU, go to notebook, check, and it's like, what the hell is this really? What am I looking at?
Yeah.
Because, besides like the big ones, that you see everywhere and you know what they are. I have no idea what they are. I don't memorize mobile chips.
No. And I think, obviously they released the i9 for mobile as well, I guess, with the 6 cores. And it's just like, but why? I guess, like, why is it not an i7? Why is it an i9 CPU? Is that going to be the last mobile CPU for a while as well? I don't know.
I would assume so. I mean, they're having trouble getting 6 cores into mobile without having heat issues. Yeah. So there's no way they're going 8. Honestly, that's going to pull a ton of power. That's why it's definitely going to need to be soldered. So until there's a new node, 6 cores is going to be the most that Intel can do.
Yeah, and I suppose this quote unquote 95 watt TDP is certainly not real.
No. 95 watt TDP at its base clock. What's the base clock? At 3.6 gigahertz, I guarantee you have 95 watt TDP. Yeah.
I remember when TDP was actually a number where if you were hitting that TDP, you were actually at like completely full performance. Like I remember my Ivy Bridge Extreme CPU, which is 140 watts. I was even overclocked. I was hitting like just over 100. And like if you were hitting that 140, it'd be for the maximum CPU, available, maximum performance available. But now TDPs, I think it's just a bit of a joke.
Well, if they have to bring out the Core i9 9900K 215 watt TDP next to, the i7 2700 with 65 watt TDP. Oh, it beats it by 50%. This draws a third the power.
Yeah.
Which one's better? Realistically, they would have to then compete on that. But because they can use that base clock and use that for the TDP. Well, we told you it's only going to run at 3.6 gigahertz.
Yeah. And overclocking voids your warranty and all that kind of stuff,
Well, overclocking always did. I mean, realistically, overclocking was only used back in the day because, first off, all CPUs were locked, and the higher end stuff, like 33 megahertz more, would cost you like an extra $200. So you didn't want to do that. So that's why you overclock. Today, overclocking is completely worthless. It's just not even worth doing. You're wasting time, effort, money. You have to buy better cooling. Realistically speaking, anybody overclocking for anything other than benchmarking, there's no point. Now, GPUs, it makes a little bit of sense if your game's running slow, but any modern day 6-core or better CPU, it's going to be more than enough for gaming, even at high refresh. So to me, it's just a waste of time.
Yeah. And we'll definitely talk to you a little bit more in depth about that very soon. But I suppose we'll move on to your content. We did miss this out before, but I suppose, I talked in the intro about your GPC and IPC videos, and I just was really curious to where that came from. How did you come up with the idea? What do you do? And how are these possible? I guess, we'll start off with that aspect of things. What is it about?
Okay, well, GPC is a little bit more complicated, so we'll start with that one. And this mostly came out because of Vega. Like I said, we saw 2 times better, 2 times better, 2 times better, not 2 times better. So I'm like, all right, what am I missing here? So, I mean, I don't have all the resources in the world, But if you take a Vega 56, it's got 3584
Yep.
stream processors. So does the R9 Fury. Now, if you take those two GPUs, they have the same core count. I think they even have the same ROPs and TMUs. So it's almost like a perfect lineup. And then you run them at the exact same clock speed. It's just like an IPC test on PC. And you can see how much better GPUs actually are, you know, if there's any architectural change there. And that's kind of where I got the idea. So I started off, I just wanted to do like architectures, you know, let's see how Kepler compared to Maxwell to Pascal. I didn't get to the AMD ones. I actually did the video, but those videos they didn't do very well. So I didn't feel like making it at the time, honestly. And unfortunately, I lost that data, but I did do Gen 2 GCN compared to Maxwell and Kepler. So, spoiler alert, I can go ahead and do that. It's better than Kepler, worse than Maxwell. It's just where it landed. Kepler was terrible architecture compared to even GCN. Maxwell is so much better, it's not even funny. It's kind of like going from I don't know if it's quite this much, but it feels kind of like going from NetBurst up to, you know, the Core 2s from Intel. It's that big of a jump. Now for IPC, it's kind of the same thing. I see people all the time. They're like, oh, well, this is better, that's better. Most people don't know what they're talking about. So I wanted to have like an actual chart with numbers. It's like, this is how much faster this was than that architecture. So then it just kind of puts to bed a lot of the arguments and debates, especially if you see like the 2700X compared to like the 8700K, you know, the Coffee Lake versus the Gen 2. And IPC wise, I did the math the other day using somebody else's numbers. It was like 11% or something. And it's like, grand scheme of things, that's absolutely nothing. So that's the reason why I wanted to do that. And it's just so I could have a whole chart top to bottom as much as I could, because it all had to be 64-bit operating system to run all the same benchmarks. Had to start with the Pentium 4s, couldn't go any earlier. So figured I'd start there, do everything in between. So this way everybody can see exactly how much we progressed and when we progressed the most.
Yeah, I think, you know, honestly, you know, I thought, you know, why didn't you start from the top down? But actually, I think that those videos probably wouldn't do as well, you know, because people know what's out there in terms of saying, oh, Ryzen's quote unquote this much better than, you know, Coffee Lake or whatever like that.
Right.
But starting from the bottom down actually says, well, how far have we come? And, you know, really, you know, well, you know, people, you know, obviously with the Athlons and the old Pentiums, it's like, well, you know, Athlons was, you know, so much better, and why is it so much better? And I suppose your benchmarks expose particular aspects of the CPU, and I think that's certainly really well done. And I guess, yeah, it's certainly, you know, I always look forward to saying, well, well, what are we testing this week? It's definitely, you know, one of those, you know, it's a hell of a lot better than saying, oh, the 1180 is going to be 35% better. It's like, you know, hell of a lot better than the rumor mill crap, you know.
Right. Actual hard data.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. Totally agree with that. And I guess the questions I wanted to talk about was, you know, obviously you test, you know, obviously trying to get equivalent CPUs, equivalent chipsets. You have a particular set of, restrictions for, you know, 3 gigahertz your core clock, you know, same amount of RAM, you know, you equivalently, test the RAM to the same frequency and latencies as well. So, but I just sort of, how relevant do you see these videos being in terms of, like, you know, obviously, when you get further on down the line, you know, certainly with used hardware and stuff like that, do you think that's going to affect people's decisions at all? And is that the sort of audience you were looking for, or is this just something in your own hobby?
Yeah, no, this was just something that I wanted to do. Just, hey, this is going to happen type of a thing. And if you're interested, you're interested. Mostly the reason why I'm doing it is because nobody has that chart. There's nobody from NetBurst to Coffee Lake and from K8 to Ryzen. Nobody has that graph showing exactly how much performance has changed. Now, there's been a lot of pushback from the community because everybody thinks IPC should mean something else. And that's what I tried to address in the first video. It's like, this is what we're trying to establish. And I made it as clear as I possibly could. But, you know, people always want what they want. And I found out a long time ago, giving people what they want isn't the best idea. Do what you're going to do what makes sense, and just make it happen type of thing. But that's the reason why I added in a few extra tests, is because everybody was like, all right, well, Cinebench isn't that great and this and that. And I'm like, okay. Funny enough, Cinebench, the average of all the tests, I'm going to leak this here first. But if you take all the tests combined and the average numbers and compare it just to Cinebench, they're almost identical. So realistically speaking, there's almost no reason to run any other CPU test besides Cinebench if you want to get a realistic average of how things would pan out.
Yeah, I do like the certainly the memory latency is certainly quite a highlight for me in terms of, obviously back then with Intel still using a North Bridge and not an integrated memory controller, it's certainly like, well, how much does that add on, and does that actually equate to any performance loss? And obviously it wasn't back then, but yeah, it was definitely that's like a highlight for me of more in depth with architectures and how things go. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, and with that Athlon 64 with the really high L2 cache, I was just like, what the heck? And I tested it multiple times. I even tested it on another motherboard, and it came out the same. So I'm like, it could just be that one CPU. I don't know. I don't have multiple CPUs for testing, but I was like, that's a little strange, but it's still performance leading. So whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I suppose before we move on to like the future of the series, I would like to thank all of Chris's Patreon people for donating hardware for this, and it's certainly looking forward to obviously when you get the new hardware in, what that's going to look like, definitely, because obviously you're going to look at the Extreme series, the first gen, and also the mainstream i7s as well. I suppose it's the first time that's happened, one coming out earlier than the other actually, so that's going to, certainly the IPC of that's going to be interesting to see how well how much more you're going to get from going from obviously Core 2 to that will be hopefully quite big, but maybe not.
I was gonna say the benchmarks are already done.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna spoil that.
No, I wasn't expecting that at all. But yeah.
But yeah, I'd also like to thank all my supporters, Patreon, everybody on Discord that have donated. I got in from Radeon Omega. He's a good guy over there on Discord. He sent in a Radeon 5850. I got that in yesterday. I'm actually going to post something up saying thanks for that here after I get done here. And that's been great. I never thought that people would want to support the channel like that, but it helps out a lot because I can't get everything. I'll use the resources that I can, but this helps expedite things, which is really awesome.
Yeah. And I suppose to finish off this particular part is, what's the future going to be? Are you going to stop once you get to current gen? Is there going to be further tests? Are you going to get more hardware, in terms of for more for more in-depth testing, certainly with GPUs and stuff like that? Are you going to go the Gamers Nexus route? I guess was what I'm going to say with that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Like go all ultra crazy in depth. No. Unfortunately, once we get up to current, I'll keep it up to date when something else comes out, like when Zen 2 comes out. We'll keep it up to date. So this way that graph will continuously be up to date. But as far as CPUs go, I'm going to be done with that. Now, GPUs, I'm going to start on that series. And I want to do the $199 price point throughout history. So we're going to be starting off with because we're just going to do PCIe, which started in 2004. There's really no reason to go back any further than that. I mean, there just isn't. Plus, we can use the same test system throughout. So we're going to be starting with, the GeForce 6600 GT and the Radeon X700 Pro and see how they shook out back then. Because what's really funny is if you look at like die sizes and things, which I have it all graphed out and I'll show people once we get there. But just to see how little things have changed or how much things have changed over, that's 14 years ago now. Yeah. And by the time I get to that video, it'd probably be next year. So, when we're done with testing all of them, it'll probably be into next year. So at that point, it'll be 15 years and how much things have changed or didn't change. It'll actually be kind of surprising. Plus, it'd be kind of nice to see if at identical price points, who was better? Was it ATI? Was it Nvidia? Was Nvidia always the fastest? Because a lot of people like to equate the fastest GPU overall as having the better product. Whereas if somebody has a better product at a lower price point or a similar price point, which is great because there's always a $199 GPU.
Yep.
To me, that's the winner. It's who provides more value or who has traditionally provided more value over time. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think when you talked about, it was some video you're talking about saying you wanted to do like overclocking benchmarks and things like that and compete with mismatched hardware. So
yeah.
How did that come about?
Oh, I just thought it'd be really, really fun. Like I picked up some old hardware, like the guy showed on the video. I have a 6800 Ultra that I picked up for like $60. They're now like $300 because I got it at the right time.
Yeah.
But might as well throw that in my Ryzen 1600X. Let's just see how it does.
Yeah.
Let's push these things to the max, or take like a, maybe the Athlon 64 X2 and throw in, I don't know, if I had a Titan XP or something, that'd be pretty hilarious. And just see what you got. But I'll probably use like my RX 580, which is as ridiculous because, it's just so much more powerful.
Yeah.
But, there's so many benchmark points out there that aren't taken. There's a world record for every combination of hardware. So might as well have fun with it and take a few spots. And then the community can then go ahead and do the same thing. A lot of these parts are cheap. So, they can go out and pick them up and, we can just have fun with it. That's what 3D Mark used to be. It wasn't people with LN2, liquid nitrogen, shunt mods and being paid to overclock, have 15 motherboards and 20 processors and you get to cherry pick a lot of them. That's not how it used to be. It just used to be you had what you had and you compared it against other just random people. And that was a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, are you going to go like liquid cooling with any of the stuff there, or are you going to like?
No,
you're not. You're just going to go completely air. Wow. Okay, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. No, I don't care for water cooling of any kind, and I don't care for. Obviously, going LN2 or anything like that's just crazy. I'm just not a fan. I don't like it. If a fan breaks down, you could replace it. It's a pain in the ass replacing like a full custom water loop. And like I said, realistically, for day to day, overclocking isn't really smart or necessary anymore. So it's like, why bother? Whoops, sorry. So that's just my opinion. I just prefer air cooling.
Yeah. I suppose you wouldn't like to see what's beside me right there then.
I mean, it's to each their own, but that's just how I
Yeah. So I suppose that's right. It reminded me of a competition I was going to enter a couple of months back on the hard forums, where they wanted you to use a GTX 260 and any combination of CPUs up to 4 cores and 8 threads, and they just wanted you to go at it with video encoding benchmarks and 3D Mark 01 and all that kind of thing. And I thought, what a great way to really encompass your community and say, well, if anybody, I've managed to get my card bought from someone else, but they're $40-50, it's a real cheap, obviously New Zealand,
right?
And I thought that'd be great to actually have a video series on that too. So I was really inspired to see you pick up that and say, this is what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely gonna get on that. I'm trying to get in some I want to get a better camera, obviously, before I do that, because I'd like to have better quality videos. There's just some other hardware I'd like to have on hand before I do that, because then this way we could really showcase the parts that we're using and things like that, and just make it look a little bit nicer. So I really want that to be a premium long-term series that'll always be a staple of the channel, because you can always just come up with crazy combinations.
Yeah.
So I just want to do it right. So I figured I'd hold off, continue doing what I'm doing for right now, and then probably in the next couple of months, we'll really kick that off.
Awesome stuff. Definitely looking forward to that as a whole. Do we have time to move on to obviously some science and tech and some some opinion pieces at the end, or are you short for time?
I was gonna say let's jump on over to. Let's jump on to the opinion stuff.
All right, cool. All right, so we'll miss out that for this week, but that's no problem at all. So I suppose the one that's been a bit of a staple of this particular podcast is talking about 4K. This started. My podcast started about 3 years ago. It's been on and off since then. Right,
it's been around since the GTX 600 series. 4K was the future back then.
Okay, yeah. So I mean. So what do you think of today as a standard?
I mean, it's nice to have it as a goal, but realistically, it's not necessary, I think, for most people. I think most people would be happier if TVs were 1440p, 120 hertz. I think they would actually prefer that. And a lot of 4K TVs do offer that. So I figure a lot of people that want to game with a PC in the living room, that's probably the way that they're going to prefer to game. Now, for consoles and stuff, shooting for 4K makes a lot of sense because of how weak the CPUs are in those consoles, using, you know, a way overpowered GPU, kind of like how we were talking about with the mix match hardware. Talk about mix match, that's what consoles are. But they can push the 4K graphics because they're only targeting 30 frames per second. So I think for that, it makes a lot of sense. As far as productivity goes, I think 4K is just too high a resolution with Windows, at least. It just doesn't scale very well. And typically you would need at least a 32-inch, which is what a lot of people say. Yeah. Personally, I think 32 inches where I like 1440p at, and I like 1080p smaller than that. But that's to each their own. But you know, if you had like a 24-inch 4K display, I mean, just imagine how small everything would be.
Just crazy.
It would be, it'd be terrible. So, I mean, it just kind of answers itself. I mean, it's okay in the living room, and it's terrible for, you know, most people for PC work. I mean, if you're going to be doing professional photo editing or something, you probably have an 8K display because you need the highest resolution possible. So I think 4K is just one of those things that's been forced on the community at large, mostly through TVs, just saying, here's 4K and now it's $500. So people say, all right. But as far as like the gaming market goes, until a $200 or $300 GPU can run 4K 60 across the board, I don't think it's really going to catch on. And even then, like I said, just from a day-to-day work usage, I don't think anybody who works on their PC would actually go that high unless they need it for like video or photo or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've just updated myself to 1440p, and that's been a huge change with like performance, and also like, you know, productivity has been great on that sort of system. But it's just 4K, so it's still at a point where it's not mainstream enough yet to actually be supported properly, I guess you can say, unless you're a professional or a some sort of you know, gaming on a TV. Yeah,
that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So I guess the next one is, you know, something you talked about earlier, is extreme overclocking. I suppose I haven't really heard you talk much about that. Do you think that that's a good way to advertise CPUs? Do you think that's good for, you know, for people who can do it? Is it a relevant market, I guess?
I mean, it's fun. I mean, let's face it. I mean, like I said, for day-to-day use, I don't feel the need for it. But, you know, when we do the mismatch hardware, if I can't beat somebody's score, yeah, I'm going to overclock the crap out of it. Yeah. You know, we're that's part of it. It's like souping up your car. You want to win the race. Yeah. But, you know, you don't run your car day to day like that. So as far as for like marketing goes, I definitely don't agree with that. Realistically, I think it'll never happen, but I would want to see all CPUs tested with their box coolers. Yeah. You know, get rid of these all-in-ones. They're only as good as what it comes with in the box. And if it doesn't come with the cooler, then when you see MSRP, just add like $50 to it. Be like, this is how much this costs. And penalize companies for not providing appropriate cooling. And that's one of the things that AMD did really well with, is actually giving you good cooling. So AMD is actually being penalized for doing that, adding more value, because it's not showing on those charts where it shows, you know, CPU and then all the specs and then price, when you're comparing it to Intel processors. And basically they're getting all the major benefits of, you know, the overclocking and all of that without any of the drawbacks to it. So I think for marketing it's bad, but for doing it, me and you, I mean, for fun, yeah, absolutely. It makes a hell of a lot of sense. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have, you know, it's kind of like if you have to overclock your CPU, it's kind of like putting, you know, doing up your car. It's like, why don't you just buy a good car in the first place? You know, buy your Lamborghini or Ferrari instead of buying a Prius and adding more electric motors to it and adding a big supercharger or whatever you want to it. It's just like, it looks cool. It's a neat idea, but is it actually, you know, is it really relevant? Is
it practical? Yeah. No. I mean, if you just like to tinker, and that's what a lot of people say, well, just buy something out there. Like, you can go get an old CPU for like $10. I mean, does it really go overclock that if you just want to tinker.
Yeah.
But if you want something to actually make sense, you might as well, like you said, just buy something better. Back in the day, everything was one core, so we didn't have the market segmented like we did now, and clock speed was the only thing that really mattered. That's how you got your performance, and the price difference. A one-core, one-thread processor might cost $200, and then a one-core, one-thread processor would be $1,000.
Yeah.
Well, if I can get my processor to that speed, I just saved $800.
Yeah.
So back then it made a lot of sense, but today, they all turbo up almost to their max limit anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me anymore.
No, definitely not. No. And I suppose the last thing is talking about, is there any news you want to discuss with games that you're looking at or looking at playing or anything like that? I knew you were talking about looking at doing some more retro stuff on your channel. Is that something you're looking at?
The ray tracing stuff?
No, retro gaming.
Oh, retro gaming. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's something that I do want to do. I actually want to, once again, it kind of comes down to resources because I want to do the IPC stuff first. But I want to set up like a modern retro machine. Pretty much just going to use a 2200G build, I think, and basically show that it can run pretty much every game up to, like I'm going to have the cutoff point. Be like, this is a $100 product, and you can handle everything up to this point. But I also wanted to show people that you can install games. Like if you had old floppy games laying around, there's a lot of emulators and software and things out there nowadays to get all of that up and running right off of the original media, which is really cool. So a lot of people probably don't think that, hey, I wanted to play this old game I played when I was a kid and I still have it over here. Well, you can get a USB floppy drive and just install the thing. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that these are options, so I kind of wanted to do that. And, of course, show newer gamers some older titles that, I enjoyed growing up, and that still hold up well today.
Anything, I remember you doing a poll recently about games that you play and games for what people play nowadays, and it's like, you don't put yourself in a newer market at all?
No, for the most part, newer games are targeted for only a couple of things. For the most part, new games are targeting multiplayer, microtransactions, and streamers and streaming. They're basically just trying to get that control of that entire market. So every new game that comes out, for the most part, wants that to happen. And realistically, those games are extremely boring to me. You're doing the exact same thing over and over again. To me, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. I want to put my game down. I don't want to play the same game all the time. I want to play a new game like every couple of days if I had the time to play games that way. It's like a movie. I'd rather have, a good movie instead of like a really long, drawn-out TV series that maybe I really liked at first. But, like The Simpsons, they're 30 seasons in. It's like, all right, kind of over this now, So that's where I see gaming going today. Now, there are some pretty cool stuff still coming out. The indie side's getting way better than it used to be. It used to just be complete crap. But today it's pretty good. So, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on. I am interested in like Anthem. Anthem's kind of like a hybrid, kind of like Destiny was, where you do have that online component, but you also have that, kind of quest. There's a storyline there, something to be achieved. Yeah, so.
Well, I think that about wraps us up. Anything else we want to say before we sign out?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on. I mean, this has been fun. It's nice to just kind of chit chat and let you direct instead of me having to come up with the script. It's great. It's just react. That's great. I kind of enjoyed that. So thank you for allowing me to have this experience with you.
No problem at all. And don't forget to rate, comment, favorite, subscribe to him and also to my channel. And I'll definitely look forward to seeing your future content. I'm definitely going to be supporting you. And if you want to gain more information about what he has to do, I'll put a link in the description. And peace out for now. Bye day.
Have a good one, guys.
You too.